Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing my May wrap-up. May was definitely a slower reading month, especially towards the end, but it ended up being a really good reading month. I had a lot of great reads, one definite new favorite, another one that is a potential at least for my favorites of the year. So let's just get right into these. The first book I completed this month was The Paper Daughters of Chinatown by Heather B. Moore. This is a story following a mission home in San Francisco whose job it is to help young Chinese girls primarily who have been lured over from China during the late 1800s and are being sold into human trafficking, often being sexually abused and abused in other ways as well. Specifically, we follow Donaldina Cameron, who is a real woman who was in this mission home for a very long time and did a lot of good for these girls. We also follow a fictional storyline of one of these Chinese girls as a representation of the stories of many of these girls that came through this mission home. Definitely, obviously a hard-hitting work, but it is one that I really enjoyed. The writing style wasn't amazing. It didn't necessarily pull me into the story as much as I would have liked it to, but I just always appreciate when I'm able to read a historical fiction that draws on stories from the past that maybe are not as well known and need to be better known. And while, like I said, the writing style wasn't my favorite, it wasn't necessarily bad either. It just wasn't necessarily, it wasn't something that I necessarily loved. But I did really like this overall, honestly. It had great character development. It was fascinating to learn about specifically Donaldina Cameron and all she did for San Francisco, for the Chinatown in San Francisco. And another thing I loved about this was at the end, there's actually a whole section of chapter notes. So after each chapter, I could go and read about what in that chapter is actually true from history. And that just added so much to my experience reading this and just learning about this time period, learning about this really tragic time and issue in San Francisco back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's still a problem today. I would definitely recommend this specifically if you're interested in this sort of topic, but maybe you would prefer to avoid some more graphic type reads. This one definitely did a great job of explaining things that are going on without getting graphic about it. So it's not graphic at all. Definitely something that I think is very bearable, going to be very bearable for most people, as long as you're okay with the subject matter itself, because it is a hard subject matter, so it's not going to be necessarily an easy read, but its approach is a lot more bearable, I would say, compared to other works with similar subject matter. Next, I was able to read Half Sick of Shadows by Sebastian. I ended up counting this for my TBR Tackle challenge from Kieran from Katie Books, and I really absolutely adored this. Definitely a 5 out of 5 stars for me. This is an Arthurian legend retelling, specifically following the perspective of the Lady of Shalott. And because she's a seer, this story is able to be told in past, present, and future tenses. So there are portions that take place before the actual present. There are things taking place in the present, and then we are able to read about visions she's having about the future. So it's not really a linear story, and I think that's important to understand going into it, because if you don't, you may be a little bit confused and or bored with it. I also think it helps to have at least some basic understanding of the King Arthur legend, like very basic. You don't need to know very much at all, but some of the more central plot points will be very beneficial to understanding how this story comes together. I cannot speak in this video. I'm cutting out most of my mess ups, but it's really bad. I don't know why today is apparently not a good day for me to be filming, but I am anyway. So anyway, this is exactly what I would have wanted out of a King Arthur retelling. It just really focuses on the relationships, and that's my favorite thing to explore within Arthur retellings, is the relationship dynamics between these people and how they get to the point where they end up in the end, because there's so much friendship and betrayal and different relationships involved that's really central to everything. All of the plot that goes on in King Arthur, all the battles and everything are so much more of a side issue when compared with the relationships themselves that are the focal point. And I just really find that fascinating when that's well explored. And I definitely found it well explored in here. Is this a 5-star objectively? Probably not. The writing is definitely not the best. There's a lot I love about the writing, don't get me wrong, but there's a few little lines here and there that are a little bit cringeworthy in my opinion, a little bit cliche feeling, or just, yeah, that just don't quite sound good in my head. But it's really just little lines here and there, whereas the rest of the writing really is beautifully done and creates a great picture in your mind, and I just absolutely loved it overall. Another gripe I should mention that I have with this is in the ending, Lancelot, of course, is a character in this, and the way things end up for him, I didn't really love. I wish they had played with that a little bit more, but other than that, it was overall really great and one I would recommend if you like King Arthur retellings. Then I ended up finishing Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne, which I actually read for May of the Moderns, hosted by Margaret Pinard. Unfortunately, I did not get to very much this month. Honestly, after the first couple weeks of the month, I read these 3 books pretty much in the first 2 weeks, maybe a little more than 2 weeks of the month. In the final 2 weeks, I just barely read anything. I'll get into that in a moment. But I did read this for May of the Moderns at least, and it was really sweet. I don't have much to say about this. It was just a really cute, charming kind of collection of short stories about Winnie the Pooh and his friends. Definitely one I honestly would love to read to my children because it is just so sweet. They're just so endearing. Pooh Bear and all of his friends are so endearing, and I actually really loved the frame story as well of this man telling stories to this young boy, Christopher Robin, who has this bear, and I thought that was really sweet, so I really liked that as well. And yeah, that's really all I have to say. I only gave this 3 out of 5 stars because it wasn't necessarily amazing, it wasn't that gripping necessarily, but for what it was really cute and sweet. And the final book I completed this month was an audiobook, and that was If Walls Could Talk by Lucy Worsley. This is a nonfiction, historical nonfiction, following the history of the home. So we go into different rooms in the house, specifically the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, and the bathroom, and she discusses the history of things that go on in there. So for example, for the bedroom, she discusses the history of the bed, she discusses the history of sleep and sex and having babies, and then in the bathroom she discusses the history of hygiene, all of those different things. And it was really fascinating. I really enjoyed this. I actually don't remember what I rated it. I would say it was probably between a 4 and a 5 stars somewhere. Probably not quite a 5-star, maybe closer to a 4-star, but it was still really great. I absolutely loved it. It's not quite a 5-star simply because it didn't blow my mind away or anything, but the writing was really good and easy to listen to. I really enjoyed learning the history of all of these things. Obviously, I'm not going to remember everything I learned about, but I do remember quite a bit, and I've been able to share with a few other people. And like I said, her writing was very engaging, and I'm really excited to continue to read more from Lucy Worsley because she is a fascinating historian to me. And then finally, I'm just going to end on a couple books that I've started in the month of May that I haven't quite finished. So first of all, we have Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It's a reread for me, and I am not quite halfway through. I've decided to start taking it really slow by reading just about a chapter a day unless I feel inclined to read more. And I am annotating as I go, so it's just been a delight to get through this. I did start this towards the beginning of the month, but like I said, I am going slow. I guess actually it was like halfway through the month that I started this technically. Anyway, so I am going to be continuing with that into June, possibly all the way into July, depending on how life goes for me and how much I feel inspired to and find time to read this, because I do have Ancients-a-thon going on and another read-along that I'll mention in a moment that are taking up a lot of my time in June. So we'll see how this goes, but I will be continuing with it. And then the second half of the month that ended up going a lot slower after finishing all 3 of those in the first 15 plus days of the month, I did start reading The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, which I'm enjoying, but it's a very slow moving plot and it's been hard to get myself to pick it up and read it for long spurts of time. However, it is one I'm reading for a read along, so I will be continuing with it in June and should finish by the end of June. At least I'm going to try to, so we'll see how that goes, but yes, I am working on this. And that is it. That is what I read in May. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, your thoughts on them, as I would love to know. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you are having a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!